What's going on, everyone? Nemi here. I've been missing the last few days, testing out so many things. Unfortunately, I was editing most of them, but hey, it was fun. I do want to go through, however, some of the things that I was able to find in regards to damage in Sword of Convallaria. I did a lot of damage tests to understand how things were calculated. In particular, I wanted to see at which point vulnerability was relevant. You might be wondering what exactly vulnerability is, and I'm going to quickly tell you. Vulnerability is a debuff that can directly increase the amount of damage that we can apply to any target. The first unit that has the vulnerability debuff is the Outlaw Archer, which pretty much everyone will have, and it has the reaction skill. So pretty much you're wanting this unit to get hit by the boss so that it can apply the vulnerability debuff. There are a couple other units that have this same reaction skill. However, the only unit that I've found to have a direct application of vulnerability so far is the Knighted Guard. At his rank 7 skill, he can apply it for 3 turns. Now, just a heads up, if you see something that says increases damage taken by XXS, this is always going to be an amazing increase to your damage output, provided you are hitting a good number. So after all these damage tests, what did we find out? In general, if you are trying to increase your damage, attack buff and defense break are the most useful ways to increase damage output for your teams early on. However, the higher your damage output becomes, the more important it is to get the vulnerability debuff onto the boss. When you do a damage calculation, in general, it's going to be attack minus the defense of whatever you're fighting times the multiplier of the skill. And then you're going to multiply all of this by the vulnerability, or in case if it's defensive related, it's going to be damage reduction. Some other general things that I discovered were buffs and debuffs do not stack. You can't stack, for example, defense 1 buff with defense 2. You can't stack attack 1 with attack 2. The higher rank is going to override the lower rank in every case. The only exception to this is that some dots can stack. So for example, infection can stack up to 10. It will specify whether something can stack or not in most cases. The next thing is unique skills stack. For an example, an aura that gives people 30% magic defense and then the magic defense buff, these will both stack. Another thing that will stack with that is the damage reduction you get from rejection mask. Okay, there are many other ways to stack specific things in this game. Another example of buff stacking is you can have an attack aura with an attack buff, maybe something from the tarot skill, or even a gear or weapon skill as well. The next thing that we found out is that buffs only affect your base stats. Sorry guys, I had to reshoot this part because my ugly mug was in the way. I wanted to talk about what the attack buff will actually do. So for example, if I go in game and say I have like, I don't know, 1700 attack, a 10% attack buff is only going to give me 146. It's only going to affect whatever the value is listed in the character window. It's time we have a look at how useful vulnerability debuff could be for us. I'm going to be quite honest. This debuff isn't very useful early on. You're going to get way more damage output from a defense break and attack buff until you're able to get quite a high amount of damage from your characters. If you ever have a team that has a hyper carry, for example, or if you're just able to get really, really high stats on some unit through traits, etc., then vulnerability is going to be very, very beneficial for those kinds of teams. And just in case you're wondering, you cannot use vulnerability with dot damage or percent HP damage. It doesn't actually affect the multiplication. So you might be thinking to yourself, oh wow, I need to go and get vulnerability debuff on my team. The fact of the matter is we are actually not strong enough right now to fully utilize this debuff. For example, looking at some of the stats on a lot of the 65 clears, in general, we still weren't outputting enough damage to ensure that we could clear anything relevant. At this point, players will have 2 options. You can grow and get stronger until you reach the stat requirements you need to clear a hurdle, or you're going to have to find ways to deal damage off enemy HP, ignore defense, or debuffs. Especially any damage that gives us really large multipliers or doesn't require any attack stat in damage calculations is going to be fantastic. Now, a person by the name of Azur or Azer, I'm not too sure how you say it. He's already made a weapon trial 1 level 65 clear using this method. I do recommend watching this if you want to try clearing the trials early. It does require you to have the character Blade, but honestly, this was really cool to watch. I'm going to leave the link in the description. Feel free to check it out. There is nothing wrong with waiting until you're stronger. We don't really know the rates on clearing the weapon trials anyway, and you can only sweep once a day. So you're probably not going to miss out on much if you just wait until you're a bit stronger and just clear it with a, just a normal standard team. So I'm going to do a quick TLDW for this video. Most things you want to do is look for attack break and defense break for your teams. This is going to increase damage output the most. However, once you move on to the end game teams, you are definitely going to want to fit in a vulnerability debuff. This is going to give you the most maximum damage output for your teams. Early on, if you can't reach the damage that you need, try using dots or piercing damage to cheese the content. Once you have the strategy down for the bosses, it's mostly just a stat check. In the next video for the Power Guide series, I'm going to take a look at survivability. It's mostly the same concepts as we discussed today. However, because there are many more ways to apply defensive buffs, it might help you guys figure out some ways to make your team survive without too much effort. That's all for this one, guys. Peace out.